In my last video I fixed this Contax 139 Quartz, which had a few issues, not least of all being a dirty shutter button switch, which stopped the camera from firing, particularly if it had been sitting for a day or two. So, has it worked? Yes, of course it has. I'll do a video showing the camera and its features sometime in the future, but if you saw that last video you might remember me saying that I was initially looking for a Contax 137MA, and having not found one at a decent price I bought the 139 instead. Well, you know how it is. As soon as I'd finished that video all the 137MAs popped up, including this one. But don't get too excited, because all is not well with this copy. You don't need to look too closely to see that it's suffered a major battery leakage, probably the worst I've seen. The whole thing stinks of battery electrolyte. I can't open the bottom or release the back door. And from the looks of it, the camera was sitting upside down because the damage isn't just confined to the bottom, although that could all be down to capillary action. So, can I fix it? There's a pretty good chance on this occasion that I can't. If the battery electrolyte has made its way up to the PCB that sits at the top of the camera and rotted the legs off the chips, then I won't be getting very far, but I won't know until I get inside. I'll start off by trying to open the bottom to get those batteries out. I won't be working in my clean studio environment. In fact, I don't really want to handle the thing too much, so it's up to the workbench, armed with disposable gloves, cardboard to soak up all the goop, and white wine vinegar to neutralise the alkaline from the batteries. And bizarrely, with my workbench covered in cardboard, it looks rather like my studio setup. Oh well. So, item number 1, the battery cover. I'll start off with a bit of IPA. I'll sit the camera up a bit so the alcohol soaks in better. In fact, I can just stand the camera upside down for the time being. And now give it a try, but it's still as solid as ever. I don't want to force it too much and risk breaking the catch, so I'll add some vinegar and let it sit for a while. While that's doing its thing, I'm going to remove the leatherette. If it comes off intact, I'll use it as a template for a replacement trim, and if it doesn't, which appears to be the case, I'll just have to create the shape from scratch. And that's the first side off. That was the worst area of battery leakage, so the others may fare a bit better. Well, possibly anyway. The second side is a bit better, but where the battery electrolyte has soaked in, the fabric is completely rotten, just leaving the adhesive backing. This doesn't bode well for the inside of the camera, so this may well be a very short video. There's still no sign of movement on the battery cover catch. This could be a very long process, and having removed the leatherette I'm reminded of things like the adjuster pot that sits behind the leatherette here, and that's looking rather green and corroded. Do you get the impression that this is a bad idea? I thought I might be able to access the back door release by removing this cover plate, but I think there are 2 more screws hidden by the door itself. I thought about removing the top first, but I'd need to get the rewind crank out, which will of course need the back door open to do that. I was getting nowhere fast, so I've injected some vinegar into the battery compartment in the hopes of dissolving some of the corrosion around the catch plate. If I give the camera a good old jiggle with the fluid in there, it should hopefully speed up the process. OK, it sat while I had my lunch, and the room now smells like a cross between a fish and chip shop and a battery factory. So let's try again. And that moved a bit. Good times. And there it is the rest of the way. I'll just reposition the camera ready for the big reveal. Ooh, that's a bit grim. If I get in a bit closer, those batteries aren't quite as old as I expected, with an expiry date of March 2011. The battery holder is still a bit stuck in there, so I'll go away for a bit and do some decontamination. I'm sure I'll need to replace the spring contacts on the battery holder, but I'll just demonstrate how well the vinegar works to neutralise the alkaline from the batteries. You can see it fizzing away happily. And as expected, the spring is now in many pieces, but that's an easy enough fix. The bulk of the battery holder is still intact, which is the main thing. Well, that's the bottom cover and the battery holder stripped and cleaned. I haven't replaced the battery springs yet. I'll do those later in the proceedings. I've also partially cleaned the bottom of the camera, so that's looking a bit more healthy now, but there's still work to do down there. Now the bottom cover is off, I can get to the base of the back door release and give it a prod. And I think it has probably already loosened itself after I put the vinegar in the bottom. So let's take a look in the back. Is it good or is it bad? Well, it could be worse. The shutter curtains look okay, or at least what little I can see of them anyway. And I've seen worse corrosion on the film guides on many cameras before. The sprocket drive feels jammed solid, but the take-up spool feels free enough. I might try to get the top off next to see how bad it is in there. Actually, before I try to get the top off, I'll see if the sprocket drive will free off with a little vinegar. And it's hardly moving freely, but at least I've got a little movement, so now for the top removal. As you might expect, using vinegar to neutralise the alkaline deposits can cause problems of its own, so every part needs to be washed thoroughly afterwards. If I remember correctly, the top cover should be pretty easy to remove. Just the rewind crank, which I can now do because the back door will open. Then a lock ring to release the index marker. 3 screws to release the exposure compensation and film speed dials. This also frees up the ISO setting ring along with the tension spring. There should now be some case screws, 1 on each side and 1 on each side of the viewfinder, and finally 1 slightly larger screw on each side of the lens mount. These can go straight into the vinegar for a clean-up before I put them into storage parts. And now for the big reveal that may well determine the repairability of this camera. Well, it's good and bad. This is the shutter speed setting pin, which has broken off the dial. That could be a pain to fix. The chips look okay on a first glance. The fact that there are so many areas of corrosion up here clearly shows that the alkaline has deposited itself everywhere, so there will very likely be more surprises to come. Just look at the state of the top cover on the inside. And that's the cover stripped of all its components, ready for a good clean. Just look at it fizz. While I was waiting for the top cover to react, I carefully picked off a few bits of corrosion from the upper mechanism of the camera, so there's a bit less to dissolve later on. And here's the top cover reassembled. There are still some traces of green, but it's no longer fizzing, and those areas shouldn't affect anything else, so they can stay like that as far as I'm concerned. I've even managed to repair the broken pin on the shutter speed knob. It's made of some sort of styrene-based plastic, so I could use plastic weld to join it back together. Rather handily, my solder dispenser tube is just the right diameter to fit inside the ring, so the plastic pin was held in the correct alignment as the weld set. The dispenser is made from a plastic that doesn't get affected by the solvent, so that was perfect for the job. The fact that the pin was broken in the first place is probably due to the speed ring itself being stuck solid, and there are clumps of green beneath it, so there may well be vaporised tracks on the PCB beneath, not to mention the wiper contacts, but I'll get to that in good time. Similar to the Contax 139, there's a decorative surround round the cable release socket, which can be removed using a sheet of rubber as a friction tool. This one was a bit sticky from all the goop, but it's out now. The rubber feet on the tripod socket should be hiding some screws, which can be removed to release the tripod socket itself, which in turn reveals the 2 screws securing the lower nose trim, which should now pull downwards to remove it from the camera. Thusly. Rightly or wrongly, I'm cleaning up and fixing parts on this camera as I dismantle it, even though it may well have corrosion on the electronics that will render the whole project pointless. But that's the way I like to work, so I'll carry on in that vein. As such, one of the fixing lugs on the lower nose trim has snapped off, so I'll clean the trim and repair that before carrying on to the next stage. And for a wider view of my workbench, small components are labelled up and go in pill containers once they're cleaned up. I've got a little tray of vinegar here which currently has the tripod socket in it, but that should be clean by now, so I can transfer it to a tub of clean water. There's a dirty paintbrush to use with the vinegar, and a clean one for the water. A few basic tools, some cotton buds, some meths, and of course the vinegar. If I shot a wider view, you'd get to see the real chaos that surrounds my working area, but I'll spare myself the embarrassment. When I shot the last clip, I hadn't noticed that the mounting posts for the depth of field preview button were also broken off, so I've had to repair those as well. The ABS solvent is still drying, so I'll leave reattaching the light seals until later. There's a wedge that goes behind the depth of field preview button, and one on the opposite side too, and a strip up each side of the trim piece. Next I can remove the two front panels. 2 screws for the right hand panel, as viewed from the front of the camera, and 3 for the left hand panel. And now I can see what horrors lurk beneath. Well, it's not really a surprise, but holy crap, that's not good. If I do ever get this thing running again, it'll be bridge wire-tastic, because the tracks on this lower circuit board are gone, and not to mention this part, and maybe this surface mount transistor, I guess. And just for a laugh, let's have a look at the other side. By comparison, this side looks almost mint. Oh well, I may as well carry on now I've started. So next I can start preparing to remove the mirror box. There's a handful of wires to unsolder, so I might play a bit of music and create a de-soldering montage. Let's see how this goes. Well, that was all a bit of a faff. The corrosion made it very difficult to get the heat through to the old solder, and in some cases there wasn't much there to unsolder anyway. Adding flux didn't help on the really bad joints, but on the plus side, with this corroded PCB coming up from the base of the camera being a separate piece, it might have saved the more complex board that sits above it. Well, maybe a bit anyway. There are still a few more bits to dismantle before I can remove the mirror box, but I've been meaning to remove the bottom cover catch plate, along with the cover that sits beneath it, so I'll do that while I think about it. And lurking behind that cover are more corroded components. Some of these will be easily replaceable components, although there's a lead or something down here that has something to do with the optional data back for this camera. Not that I have any intention of getting one of those. Next, some stuff on the top will need to come off. In fact, I might be tempted to remove the prism at this stage, but I'll think about that as I take bits off. I've freed off the shutter button plate. There were 2 screws at the back and one in the front corner that also mounted the strap lug. The solder joint between this post and this micro switch also needed to be unsoldered. I'll take this cover off that protects the upper PCB. Just 2 screws to remove to do that. And then there are a couple of wires to unsolder above the counter dial. The viewfinder eyepiece cover can come off, just 2 screws to undo for that. And because it's attached to the PCB, the ISO dial will probably need to be released from the body of the camera too. But this assembly that has the exposure compensation mechanism on it is held in place with 2 screws and a nut, and both screws are corroded in place, so I'll have to free these up before I can go any further. There's also an index ball just here, so I need to attempt not to lose that as I work. Well, that took some time. A combination of soaking the screws in vinegar and heating them up with a soldering iron eventually got them both moving, and now I can remove that part of the mechanism. I've removed this C-clip off camera to prevent the inevitable moment that it flies off into orbit never to be seen again, and now I can lift off the plate along with the wiper disc below. I think there should be a little life left in the wiper contacts, so it's straight into the vinegar for them. Just look at them fizz. There's a lock nut holding this board in place, and 5 solder joints onto the PCB, so I'll get those removed and then it'll be on to the next level. That board isn't too bad. I think all the tracks are intact, but I need to clean the switch contact here while attempting not to destroy the resistor track or the gold plating on the centre contact, so I'll go away and have a go at that before moving on to the next section. And that's those 2 cleaned up, ready to fight another day. They're hardly like new, but they'll work well enough. Now for the last bit before I can remove the mirror box. There's a couple more joints to unsolder, and I'll carefully remove the shutter speed index spring. Then there's a washer to come off, along with the shutter speed disc, which, as expected, is looking pretty rough on the underside. Lastly, there are 2 posts and a screw, and the board should lift out, but the posts are stuck solid at the moment, so I'll have to go away again for a little bit and free those off. Well, that took much longer than expected, but all that's left now is to remove 2 screws at the front and 2 at the back, and I should be able to carefully remove the mirror box along with the main PCB, the shutter button board and the shutter speed board. But it's unlikely to come out all that easily in this case. I'll progress slowly in case there's still something catching, but it's definitely coming. I'll pause for a minute while I stick my head where the video camera is so I can see what's going on. Predictably, once I could see what I was doing, it came out. I think it was just catching on bits of wire and bits of the circuit board. On most cameras that would be enough of a strip down to do most servicing and repairs, but this one is going to need every part removed and decontaminated. It's amazing how much the alkaline has penetrated. Every screw fizzes away in the vinegar all the way down the threads. So I'm going to end the video here. There will be a part 2, hopefully fairly soon, but I still think the chance of success is pretty low, so don't get too excited during the wait. If you've enjoyed watching, please like the video and maybe even subscribe to the channel so you don't miss part 2 when it's released. That's it for now, so thanks for watching and I'll see you in a future video.